The massive throne room stretched endlessly, its walls made of living crystal that pulsed with the heartbeat of 1,000 conquered worlds. Emperor Theta sat motionless on his obsidian throne, his 4 arms folded precisely across his armored chest. His species, the Vorthak, had evolved beyond emotion millions of years ago. They considered feelings a weakness, a primitive trait they had surgically removed from their genetic code. Theta's empire spanned half the galaxy. His decisions were pure logic, calculated to maximize efficiency and control. When he ordered the harvest of a planet's resources, he felt nothing for the billions who might perish. When he commanded fleets to glass entire solar systems, no satisfaction or regret touched his 3 hearts. He was perfect, as all Vorthak were perfect, cold, logical, unstoppable. The small bundle in the crystalline cradle beside his throne stirred. His hatchling, barely 3 cycles old, opened its 6 eyes and made a soft clicking sound. Theta observed it with the same detachment he showed everything else. The hatchling was merely the continuation of his genetic line, produced through careful selection and laboratory precision. He fed it, protected it, ensured its survival, all logical actions to preserve his dynasty. Supreme One, his advisor Zeklon approached with measured steps. The new territory requires your inspection. The humans of Earth have been subdued, and their integration into the Empire proceeds as calculated. Theta rose from his throne, his 9-foot frame casting long shadows in the bioluminescent light. Earth, just another conquered world among thousands. The humans had fought, as all species did, but resistance was illogical against the Vorthak Empire. Now they served, as was proper. "Prepare my ship," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, but no emotion. "I will inspect this Earth personally." The journey through hyperspace took only moments in his personal dreadnought, a ship that could crack moons with its weapons. Theta brought his hatchling, secured in a portable life pod. Why he brought it, he could not say. Perhaps some deep programming insisted rulers should display their progeny, showing the continuation of power. Earth hung before them, blue and green, scarred by the recent conquest, but still functioning. The Vorthak did not destroy useful resources. The humans had been permitted to maintain some of their cities, their culture stripped down to serve the Empire's needs. Theta descended to the surface, choosing a random city to inspect, New Tokyo, according to his data files. The city was a mixture of human architecture and Vorthak efficiency modifications. Humans moved through the streets with the careful steps of the conquered, their colorful clothing a stark contrast to the gray uniforms of Vorthak peacekeepers. Theta walked among them, his hatchling's life pod floating beside him on anti-gravity suspensors. Humans scattered before him, recognizing the Empire's supreme ruler by his elaborate armor and the way reality itself seemed to bend around his presence. He entered a small establishment, what the humans called a restaurant. His security detail had cleared it moments before, but one human remained, a female in simple clothing, apparently the proprietor. She stood behind a counter, her hands trembling but her chin raised. Theta noted this detail. Humans often displayed defiance even when it was illogical. "You may continue your functions," he stated, settling his massive frame into a booth that groaned under his weight. The life pod settled beside him, his hatchling visible through the transparent aluminum window. The woman, her name tag read Sarah, approached slowly. What can I get you?" Her voice shook, but she maintained what humans called eye contact. "Nothing. I observe." Theta's translator rendered his words in perfect English, though his true voice was a series of harmonics no human throat could produce. Sarah's eyes moved to the life pod, and something changed in her expression. The fear remained. But something else appeared. Something Theta's extensive files on human behavior identified as maternal interest. "Is that your child?" she asked, the question surprisingly bold for one of the conquered. "My genetic successor," Theta corrected. "It requires no designation beyond its function." Sarah moved closer, and Theta's security implants tracked her every motion, ready to vaporize her if she threatened the hatchling. But she merely looked through the transparent window, and her expression softened further. "It's beautiful," she whispered, and Theta's universal translator struggled with the concept. Beauty was not something the Vorthak understood. It served no logical purpose. The hatchling stirred, making the clicking sounds that indicated it required sustenance. Theta retrieved a nutrient cylinder from the pod's storage compartment, preparing to insert it into the feeding port. The hatchling's clicks grew louder, more insistent, what humans might call crying, though Vorthak had no such concept. "It's upset," Sarah said softly. May I try something?" Theta analyzed the situation. The human female posed no physical threat. She could not damage the life pod's defenses. Her request was illogical, but denying it was equally without purpose. He gestured permission with one of his secondary arms. Sarah moved closer to the pod and began to hum. The melody was simple, rising and falling in patterns that served no mathematical purpose. Then she began to sing, her voice quiet but clear. "Hush, little star child, don't you cry. Your daddy rules the endless sky. And if that sky should ever fall, he'll hold you safe through it all." The effect was immediate and inexplicable. The hatchling's clicking ceased. Its 6 eyes focused on Sarah through the transparent barrier, and its small chest rose and fell in rhythm with her melody. Theta's instruments detected changes in its vital signs. Heart rates synchronizing, brainwaves smoothing into patterns of what humans called contentment. Sarah continued her improvised lullaby, weaving words about stars and safety, about strength and softness. The hatchling's eyes began to close, one pair at a time, until it settled into dormancy. In all its short life, it had never entered sleep state so easily. "How?" Theta's question emerged without conscious decision. "What mechanism did you employ?" Sarah stepped back, suddenly remembering who she was addressing. I just sang to it. I'm sorry, I should have asked. Explain the process." His voice carried an edge of something that, in a species capable of emotion, might have been urgency. "It's just a lullaby," Sarah said. "I sing them at the shelter." She stopped, clearly having said too much. "Continue." Sarah's shoulders slumped. "There's a shelter for war orphans, human children who lost their parents in the conquest. I volunteer there, singing to help them sleep. Music helps with trauma, with fear, with—" She gestured helplessly. "With feeling less alone." Theta processed this information. Music as a therapeutic tool. Illogical, yet the evidence before him was undeniable. His hatchling slept peacefully, its vital signs optimal. No Vorthak technology had achieved this result so efficiently. "You will accompany me," he decided. "You will perform this function for my hatchling." Sarah's eyes widened. What? No, I can't. I have the restaurant, the shelter. Your establishment will be maintained. Your shelter will receive resources. You will be compensated." Theta stood, his decision absolute. "This is not a request." He turned to leave, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "Does it have a name?" "I told you. It requires no designation beyond. Every child needs a name." Her voice carried a strange conviction. Something more than just hatchling or successor? Something that belongs only to them. Theta stared at her for 4.7 seconds, an eternity by Vorthak standards. "Names are inefficient. They serve no purpose. They serve every purpose, Sarah countered, her fear seemingly forgotten in her passion. A name says, you matter, you're unique, you're more than just your function. Even emperors need to be more than their titles. Something shifted in Theta's chest, a sensation he had no reference point for. His diagnostic systems found nothing wrong, yet the feeling persisted. He looked at his sleeping hatchling, then back at this small human female who dared to lecture the emperor of half the galaxy. You will come, he repeated, but his tone carried less command and more something else. You will sing for it, and perhaps, he paused, the words foreign on his tongue, perhaps you will suggest a name. Sarah studied him with those expressive human eyes, seeing something that Theta himself did not understand. All right, she said finally, but I have conditions. No one set conditions for the Emperor of the Vorthak. No one negotiated with the ruler of 10,000 systems. Yet Theta found himself inclining his head, waiting to hear what this small human would demand. I need to visit the shelter every day. The children need me, and I want resources for them. Food, medicine, teachers, real teachers, not indoctrination officers. She stood straighter with each word. And I want to bring some of them to meet your baby. Hatchling. Whatever. Children need other children. Illogical, Theta stated automatically. Necessary, Sarah countered. Your baby responded to my song because it needs connection, warmth, feeling, things your people have forgotten, but that it still carries in its genetics. You can't evolution away the need for love in just 1,000,000 years. Love. The translator struggled with the word, offering dozens of inadequate definitions. Theta dismissed them all as irrelevant. Yet his hatchling slept peacefully, soothed by this human's voice, and that was data he could not ignore. Your terms are acceptable, he said finally. You will be transported to my ship immediately. I need to pack, to make arrangements. My staff will handle logistics. You will come now. He paused, then added with difficulty, please. The word tasted strange, unnecessary, inefficient. But Sarah smiled, an expression that served no logical purpose, yet somehow made that strange sensation in his chest intensify. As they prepared to leave, Sarah approached the life pod one more time. Hello, little one, she whispered. I'm going to take care of you, and maybe, just maybe, I'll teach your daddy something about taking care of you too. Theta heard every word through his enhanced audio sensors. He should have corrected her presumption. He should have reminded her that Vorthak needed no instruction from lesser species. But he remained silent, watching this human female look at his hatchling with something his people had abandoned eons ago. The journey back to his flagship passed in silence. But Theta found himself replaying Sarah's song in his memory cores. The melody defied mathematical analysis, yet it had achieved what Vorthak science could not. His hatchling had not merely entered dormancy, it had been comforted. Comfort. Another concept his people had discarded as inefficient. Yet as he watched Sarah settle into the quarters adjacent to his hatchling's nursery, as he observed her immediately begin to transform the sterile space with colorful fabrics she called blankets and soft objects she termed toys, Theta wondered if efficiency was truly the only measure of value. What is its gender? Sarah asked as she unpacked the few belongings his staff had retrieved. Female, Theta responded. Though such distinctions matter little to... She needs a name, Sarah interrupted gently. What sounds do Vorthak names usually include? Theta found himself explaining the complex harmonics of his language, demonstrating sounds no human could make. Sarah listened intently, then began to hum, somehow weaving approximations of Vorthak tones into a human melody. How about Lyra? She suggested. It's a human constellation, but also a musical instrument. It bridges both our peoples. That is acceptable, Crax Theta said, though the word felt inadequate. Something about the name resonated beyond mere acceptance, creating that strange sensation in his chest again. Sarah smiled and leaned over the now-awake hatchling. Lyra. "Hello, Lyra," she sang softly. "Welcome to your new world." And as the Emperor of half the galaxy watched a conquered human sing to his daughter, something long dormant stirred in the depths of his genetically modified hearts. He had ruled through logic, through power, through the absolute absence of feeling. But perhaps, a treacherous thought whispered, perhaps there were other ways to rule. Other things worth ruling for. The thought was illogical. He did not dismiss it. 6 months passed aboard the flagship of the Vorthak Empire, and the changes were subtle but undeniable. The sterile nursery had transformed into something unrecognizable. Walls covered with human artwork depicting stars and planets, soft lighting that mimicked Earth's sunset, and always, always, the sound of music. Sarah had kept her word about the shelter children. Every week, a small group arrived under heavy guard, their eyes wide with wonder and fear as they entered the Emperor's domain. But when they saw Lyra, something magical happened. Children who had lost everything to the Vorthak conquest forgot their fear and simply saw another child who needed friends. Crax Theta observed these interactions from his command center, telling himself it was merely surveillance. But more and more often, he found himself physically present, a silent observer to something he couldn't name. "She's getting so big," Sarah said one day, lifting Lyra from her resting pod. The hatchling, though Sarah insisted on calling her a baby, had grown considerably. Her 6 eyes now tracked movement with intelligence, and her small arms reached for objects with purpose. "Her growth rate is optimal," Crax Theta stated from his position by the door. "Physical development proceeds within expected parameters." Sarah gave him that look, the one that suggested his response was somehow inadequate. She did that often, and he found himself oddly affected by it. "She smiled today," Sarah announced, settling into the rocking chair she'd insisted on importing. "When little Chen was making those bubble sounds, Lyra actually smiled." Vorthak do not smile. "Our facial structure doesn't—" "Look." Sarah turned Lyra toward him, and indeed the small mouth had curved upward slightly. "That's a smile." Crax Theta approached, his massive form somehow careful around the infant. He studied Lyra's face with scientific intensity. "A minor muscle spasm, perhaps, or an evolutionary remnant from before we transcended emotion." "She's happy," Sarah said simply. "Your daughter is learning to be happy." The word struck him unexpectedly. Daughter. Not hatchling, not successor, not genetic legacy. Daughter. It implied connection, relationship, things beyond mere biological continuation. A chime announced the arrival of today's shelter children. 3 of them, Maya, who had lost her parents in the Tokyo bombing, Robert, whose family had vanished during the resistance, and Lynn, who hadn't spoken since the conquest but hummed constantly. They entered cautiously, as always, but Sarah's presence transformed them. "Look who's awake," she said cheerfully. "Lyra's been waiting for her friends." Friends. Another concept the Vorthak had abandoned. Yet as Crax Theta watched, Lyra's 6 eyes focused on the children with unmistakable recognition. Her clicking sounds, which Sarah had learned to interpret with surprising accuracy, increased in what humans called excitement. "Can I hold her?" Maya asked, as she did every visit. "Ask her father," Sarah said, and all eyes turned to Crax Theta. He should refuse. Allowing conquered species to handle the imperial air was unthinkable. But Maya had gentle hands, and sang almost as sweetly as Sarah. Last week, she had taught Lyra a game involving colored lights that had made his daughter produce a sound he'd never heard before, something Sarah called laughter. "You may hold her, carefully." Maya beamed and accepted Lyra with practiced ease. The baby settled against her, and Maya began to sing, a Japanese lullaby her grandmother had taught her before the world changed. Robert joined in with a harmony, and even Silent Lynn hummed along. "Emperor, sir?" Robert asked suddenly, his 8-year-old boldness overcoming protocol. "Why don't you ever sing?" "Vorthak do not sing," Craxus Theta replied automatically. "We have no need for such." "Everyone needs music," Lynn whispered, and the room went still. These were the first words she'd spoken in 6 months. Sarah's eyes filled with those liquid drops humans called tears, another inefficiency. Yet they seemed to convey more than words. She moved to Lynn, kneeling beside her. "That's right, sweetie. Everyone needs music." "Even emperors?" Lynn asked, looking directly at Craxus Theta. He met her gaze. This small human child who had lost everything to his conquest, yet dared to challenge him. "Emperors do not. That is, we have evolved beyond." "Lyra hasn't," Maya said practically. "She's part emperor and she loves music. Maybe it's not evolution. Maybe you just forgot." Forgot. The word rattled through his consciousness. The Vorthak forgot nothing. Their memory cores were perfect, containing the entire history of their species. Yet when he tried to access data about Vorthak music, Vorthak art, Vorthak joy, he found only gaps labeled "deleted for efficiency." "Teach me," he said suddenly, the words emerging without conscious decision. The children stared. Sarah's mouth opened slightly in what humans called surprise. "Teach me a song," he clarified, feeling absurd yet unable to stop. For Lyra." The next hour was unlike anything in the million-year history of the Vorthak Empire. The supreme ruler of half the galaxy sat on the floor. The floor. While 3 human children and 1 waitress attempted to teach him, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." His vocal cords were not designed for human melody. His first attempts produced sounds that made the children giggle. Another sound that defied logical purpose, yet somehow improved the ship's atmosphere by quantifiable measurements. Sarah guided him patiently, showing him how to modulate his harmonics to approximate the tune. "Twinkle, twinkle," he managed, the words alien on his tongue. Lyra's 6 eyes snapped to him, wider than he'd ever seen them. She made a sound, not clicking, not crying, but something new, something that reached into his chest and squeezed. "She recognizes your voice," Sarah said softly. "Babies always know their parents' voices. Sing more." So the emperor of the Vorthak Empire, conqueror of 10,000 worlds, sang a human children's song to his daughter while human orphans coached him on proper rhythm. His security council would be appalled. His advisors would recommend immediate psychological reconditioning. His entire species would view this as corruption. He sang anyway. And Lyra, beautiful, impossible Lyra, reached out with all 4 of her tiny arms toward him, making the sound Sarah had identified as laughter. "She wants you to hold her," Sarah said. "I hold her during required feeding and—" "No." Sarah stood, cradling Lyra carefully. "She wants her daddy to hold her because she loves you." Love. That word again. The translator offered its inadequate definitions, but Craxus Theta was beginning to suspect the translator was not the problem. The concept itself defied Vorthak understanding because they had chosen not to understand it. He accepted Lyra with hands that had signed death warrants for entire civilizations. She was so small, so fragile, yet she looked at him without fear. One tiny hand reached up and touched his face, patting his angular features with what humans called affection. "Sing more," Maya encouraged. "She likes it." So he did. Badly, awkwardly, but with growing confidence as Lyra responded to each note. The children joined in, creating a chorus that should have been chaos, but somehow became harmony. Even Lynn sang, her voice clear and sweet. Sarah watched it all with that expression he'd learned to identify as joy, but there was something else in her eyes when she looked at him, something that made his hearts beat in unfamiliar patterns. Later, after the children had returned to Earth, after Lyra had fallen asleep to his unpracticed lullabies, Sarah lingered in the nursery. "You did well today," she said. "I produced sounds. Their musical value was questionable. You sang to your daughter. The value was immeasurable." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "Why did you really bring me here?" Theta considered lying, claiming it was purely for Lyra's optimal development. But something about this human woman made deception feel wrong. "Your song achieved what our science could not," he admitted. "But also, he struggled with words that had no place in Vorthak vocabulary. "When you sang to her, something in me responded, a sensation I have no reference for. It was not unpleasant." Sarah smiled, that expression that served no evolutionary purpose, yet somehow made space feel warmer. "That's called being moved. Music does that. Watching someone care for your child does that. Vorthak do not." "You do." She stepped closer, and his threat assessment protocols remained silent. She was not a threat, could never be a threat, yet she was the most dangerous thing he'd ever encountered. "You pretend you don't feel, but I see you. The way you watch her sleep, the way your hands gentle when you touch her, the way you looked when she laughed at your singing. You see incorrectly. I am Vorthak. We have transcended." "You've suppressed," Sarah corrected. "There's a difference, and Lyra is proving that every day." She was standing very close now, this small human who had somehow become central to his existence. Her hand reached up, hesitated, then touched his arm, a gesture of comfort, of connection. "Your empire runs on logic," she said softly, "but your daughter needs more than logic. She needs you. Not the emperor, not the conqueror. You. I don't know how to be that. You're learning." Her hand remained on his arm, warm and steady. "Today you sang to your daughter. Tomorrow, who knows? Maybe you'll play with her. Maybe you'll tell her stories. Maybe you'll even what? Even let yourself love her, out loud. With words and actions and all the inefficient, illogical things that make life worth living." Theta looked down at this human woman who dared to touch him, dared to challenge him, dared to see him as more than his function. His hand moved without conscious thought, covering hers. "Will you teach me?" The question encompassed more than just songs or games. It was larger, deeper, more dangerous than any treaty negotiation. "I'm already teaching you," Sarah said. "Every day, whether you realize it or not." A communication alert interrupted the moment. Zeklon appeared on the holo display, his expression as emotionless as proper Vorthak should be. "Supreme One, the Council requires your presence. There are concerns about your recent activities." Theta felt Sarah tense beside him. The Council had the power to override even an emperor if they deemed him compromised. If they decided his behavior threatened Vorthak purity. "I will attend shortly," he said, surprising himself with the calm in his voice. Zeklon's image vanished, leaving them in silence. "They'll try to stop this," Sarah said quietly. "Stop her from feeling, from growing up with emotions." "They will try," Theta agreed. Something new burned in his chest. Not the gentle warmth Sarah and Lyra created, but something fiercer. He had conquered worlds with logic and calculation, but for his daughter, for this woman who had shown him melodies could matter, he would fight differently. "What will you do?" He looked at Lyra sleeping peacefully, then at Sarah's concerned face. "I will protect what is mine," he said simply. And I am beginning to understand that protection requires more than weapons and strategy. What does it require? The word came easily now, though it would have been impossible 6 months ago. Love, he said. It requires love. Sarah's eyes widened, then filled with those inefficient tears again. But she was smiling too, and somehow that made perfect sense. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small revolution taking place on one ship. An emperor was learning to feel, a baby was teaching him how, and a human woman was showing them both that some inefficiencies were worth more than all the logic in the universe. The council would not understand. The empire would resist. The million-year tradition of emotional suppression would fight back. But in that nursery, with lullabies still echoing off the walls and his daughter's small breaths creating their own rhythm, Theta made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. He would not let them take this away. Not the music, not the warmth, not the connection. Not Sarah's songs or Lyra's laughter or his own fumbling attempts at fatherhood. The Vorthak had evolved beyond feeling. Perhaps it was time to evolve back. The Vorthak High Council chamber existed in a dimension between spaces, accessible only to the pure-blooded elite who governed the Empire's destiny. 13 figures sat in judgment, their faces hidden behind masks of living metal that reflected only logic, only purpose. Theta stood before them, refusing to bow. An emperor bowed to none, not even the council that had created his position. "You have been corrupted," Counselor Prime Vexara stated without preamble. "The human contamination spreads through you like a virus. You sing, you touch with affection, you speak of love." "I speak of evolution," Theta countered. "True evolution, not the amputation we performed on ourselves." "Blasphemy." The word echoed from 13 throats in perfect unison. "The emotion purge saved our species from self-destruction. Would you return us to the chaos of feeling?" Behind Theta, a hologram shimmered to life. Sarah in the nursery, holding Lyra while teaching a new group of shelter children a song about hope. His daughter's laughter rang through the chamber like a challenge to everything the Vorthak had become. "Observe," Vexara commanded. "Your offspring displays corrupted genetics. She feels. She connects. She weakens with each passing day. She grows stronger," Theta said firmly. "In 6 months, she has learned more about interaction than our young learn in years. Her cognitive development exceeds all projections. Her problem-solving capabilities are irrelevant if she cannot make the hard choices. Watch." The hologram shifted to a simulation. Lyra groaned, faced with a classic Vorthak test. A planet rebelled against the Empire. Logic dictated complete annihilation, but the simulation Lyra hesitated, seeking alternatives, looking for solutions that preserved life. "She fails," Vexara pronounced. "As you now fail. The human woman has corrupted you both. She has awakened us." Silence fell like a hammer. To speak of awakening implied the Vorthak had been asleep, diminished, less than perfect. "The woman will be removed," Counselor Theta announced. "The hatchling will undergo immediate reconditioning. You will submit to neural restructuring. This is decided." "No." One word, 2 letters, carrying the weight of revolution. Theta had said no to the council. In a million years, it had never happened. "You refuse the council's wisdom?" Vexara's voice carried a note that, in a species capable of emotion, might have been shock. "I refuse the council's fear." Theta stepped forward, and 13 hands moved to 13 weapons. "Yes, fear. You fear what Sarah represents, what Lyra proves, that we made a mistake, that in cutting out our hearts we cut out our strength. Emotions are weakness." "Are they?" Theta gestured, and his own hologram appeared. Battle footage from the human resistance. Observe humans fighting our occupation forces. Logic dictates surrender against superior force, yet they fight. Parents throw themselves on plasma weapons to save children. Soldiers hold positions past all reason to buy evacuation time. Why? Illogical primitive behavior. Love, courage, sacrifice. Emotions we labeled weakness that gave them strength we couldn't calculate. He paused, letting the images speak. We conquered them, yes. But we could never have inspired what they inspire in each other. We rule through fear. They resist through love. Which is stronger? You speak like them now, Counselor Jaxara observed. The corruption is complete. Then let me show you corruption's power. Crax Theta activated his private communication channel. Sarah, bring her. The council recoiled as dimensional shields parted, admitting the human woman and the imperial heir. Sarah walked steadily despite facing 13 beings who could unmake her with a thought. Lyra rode in her arms, awake and alert, her 6 eyes taking in the chamber with curiosity rather than fear. You dare bring them here? Vexara stood, energy crackling around her form. This sacred space, Sarah began to sing. It was the same lullaby from that first day, but now it carried harmonies she'd learned from studying Vorthak physiology. The melody wove through frequencies that resonated with their ancient biology, the parts they'd tried to delete but could never fully remove. Lyra joined in, her small voice creating harmonics no human could produce, bridging the gap between species with pure sound. And one by one, the counselors froze. Not from any weapon or technology, but from something far more powerful, memory. Genetic memory of a time before the Purge, when Vorthak voices had risen in song, when they had created art and beauty and connections that transcended logic. What have you done? Vexara whispered, her mask cracking to reveal eyes that suddenly held more than cold calculation. I've reminded you, Sarah said simply, never stopping her song. Your people had music once, art, love. You can see it in your architecture, in the curves beneath all the angles. You didn't evolve beyond emotion. You performed surgery on your own souls. But souls have a way of healing if you let them. Impossible, Counselor Zixatheta said, but his voice carried doubt. We are perfect. We are lonely, Crax Theta finished. We are the loneliest species in the galaxy. We connect to nothing, inspire nothing, create nothing but order. Our empire is vast and empty and cold. Lyra reached toward the nearest counselor, making the soft clicking sounds that indicated greeting. Jaxara stepped back, but the baby persisted, her small hands opening and closing in the universal gesture of, pick me up. She's not afraid of you, Sarah observed, even though you're deciding her fate. She just sees someone else who might need connection. The hatchling is compromised, Jaxara said, but his voice lacked conviction. The hatchling is complete, Craxatheta corrected. She has what we cut away. And look at her. Really look. Is she weak? As if understanding, Lyra demonstrated her latest achievement. She focused on the holographic projectors, and suddenly the battle images transformed. Where there had been violence, flowers bloomed. Earth flowers Sarah had shown her, Vorthak crystal formations from ancient texts, hybrid creations from her infant imagination. The chamber filled with impossible colors as she played with light itself, bending reality with a flexibility no pure Vorthak could achieve. How? Vexara breathed. Emotion enhances cognition, Sarah explained, bouncing Lyra gently. Earth scientists knew this centuries ago. Feeling and thinking aren't opposites, they're partners. Cut one away, and the other withers. But together, she gestured at the light show. Together they create wonders. The council stood transfixed as a 6-month-old baby did what their greatest scientists couldn't, merged technology and art into something entirely new. But more than that, as Lyra worked, She laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber like bells, like hope, like a future they'd denied themselves. "She will destroy our order," Vexara said quietly. "She will transform it," Crax Theta replied, "as she has transformed me. The question is whether we transform willingly or cling to our sterile perfection while the universe passes us by. You would risk everything on the whims of emotion? I would risk stagnation for growth. I would trade our cold peace for connection. I would rather rule a smaller empire filled with life than a vast graveyard of logic." Counselor Zix Theta approached slowly, his movements uncertain for the first time in millennia. Lyra immediately reached for him, babbling in the click-song language she was inventing. Against all protocol, all logic, all tradition, he extended one finger. Lyra grabbed it with all four hands and pulled it to her mouth, gumming it with toothless enthusiasm while maintaining eye contact with all six eyes. Zixitheta made a sound none had heard from a Vorthak in a million years. He gasped. I can feel her," he whispered. "Not just physical contact. I feel her joy, her curiosity, her—" His voice broke. "Her trust. She trusts me, though I came here to unmake her. How is such trust possible?" "Because that's what babies do," Sarah said gently. "They love unconditionally until we teach them otherwise. She doesn't know you're supposed to be emotionless. She just knows you're someone who might love her back." Love. Zixitheta tested the word as Lyra continued to investigate his finger. "We had words like this once. I remember songs, my creator before the purge. She would hold me and sing about stellar winds and quantum dances and the beauty of mathematics made manifest. Why did we cut such things away?" "Because we were afraid," Craxitheta said. "Love leads to loss. Joy leads to sorrow. Connection leads to pain when connections break. We thought ourselves brave for choosing logic, but we were cowards. We ran from the full spectrum of existence." "And now?" Vexara asked, her rigid posture softening as Lyra's light show painted impossible beauty across her mask. "Now we choose again," Craxitheta said. "Not all at once, not by force, but by example. Lyra will grow up complete, feeling and thinking, creating and calculating. Others will see her strength and wonder. Some will choose to reclaim what we lost. The empire will change, yes, but it will live rather than merely exist. The conservatives will rebel," another counselor warned. "Those who hold to the old ways will see this as an attack on Vorthak purity. Then they will face an emperor who has learned to fight for more than power." Craxitheta moved to Sarah's side, one arm settling around her shoulders with careful tenderness. "I have conquered worlds for duty, but for love, for my daughter's right to laugh, for Sarah's freedom to sing, for our people's chance to remember joy, I will reshape the galaxy itself." The council exchanged looks, at least as much as beings in masks could exchange anything, but their body language spoke volumes, uncertainty, curiosity, and underneath it all, a yearning they'd suppressed for so long they'd forgotten its name. "A test period," Vexara said finally. 1 year. The hatchling, Lyra, may develop as she will. The human may remain. You may continue your experiment. If chaos results, we intervene. If not... Vexara reached up and in a gesture that defied every protocol, removed her mask. Underneath was a face that might have been beautiful if it remembered how to smile. If not, perhaps some of us might remember our own names. Our true names, from before we became only our functions. "My name is Sarah," the human woman said, stepping forward. "This is Lyra, and whatever your name was, is, or will be, you're welcome in our nursery any time. Lyra could use more family." Family. The word rippled through the council like waves through still water. Dangerous, illogical, irrelevant to the functioning of empire. "I accept," Zixatheta said suddenly. I will visit, to observe. For science. For science, Sarah agreed solemnly, though her eyes danced with suppressed laughter. Bring a blanket. The floor gets cold during story time. One by one, masks began to lower. Faces that hadn't been seen in centuries blinked in Lyra's rainbow light. And in that moment, the future of the Vorthak Empire shifted. It would not be immediate. It would not be easy. There would be those who fought to maintain the cold perfection of logic. But in that chamber, 13 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy looked at a laughing baby and a singing human and an emperor who had learned to love, and they began to remember what they had lost. Sing again, Jack-Sarah requested quietly. The song about stars. I think I remember it. So Sarah sang, her voice joined by Lyra's babbling harmonies, and eventually, by ancient voices recalling ancient melodies. The chamber designed for cold judgment filled with warm sound, and the Empire's heart began to beat again. Outside the chamber, Crax Theta's personal guard waited. They had expected their emperor to emerge unchanged or forcibly reconditioned. Instead, they heard something impossible, the sound of the High Council learning to laugh as a baby taught them peekaboo. Sir, Captain Nixar queried as Craxatheta finally emerged, Lyra in his arms and Sarah at his side. Your orders? Craxatheta looked at his daughter, who was busy trying to eat her own foot, then at Sarah, who watched him with those impossibly expressive human eyes. Send word to all sectors, he commanded. The Empire stands, but it grows. We seek not just order but understanding, not just conquest, but connection. Any who wish to explore these concepts may apply for cultural exchange with Earth. And Captain? Yes, Supreme One. Learn the human custom called hugging. Lyra insists on teaching it to everyone, and resistance is... He smiled, the expression still new but no longer impossible. Futile. As they walked back to the nursery, Sarah slipped her hand into one of his. Such a simple gesture, skin against skin, warmth shared, connection made manifest. Yet it meant more than all his victories combined. So what happens now? She asked. Now, Crax Theta considered. Now we raise our daughter. We teach the shelter children. We sing badly. We let the Empire discover that strength comes in many forms, and perhaps we see where this connection between us leads. He squeezed her hand gently. If you're willing to teach an old emperor new tricks. Sarah smiled, and his hearts, all three of them, beat faster. I taught you to sing lullabies to space royalty. I think I can handle whatever comes next. Lyra chose that moment to demonstrate her newest skill, blowing bubbles with her saliva while making a sound remarkably like the Vorthak Imperial Anthem crossed with Old MacDonald Had a Farm. Both adults laughed, the waitress who had changed an empire and the emperor who had learned to feel. The stars continued their eternal dance, but now they danced to music, and the cold between them didn't seem quite so vast. In the nursery that night, as Sarah sang Lyra to sleep and Crax Theta added his awkward harmonies, the Empire transformed. Not through edicts or force, but through the revolutionary act of a father loving his daughter. A woman sharing her songs, and a baby proving that connection was the greatest power in any galaxy. The Vorthak had ruled the stars without feeling, but with feeling, with love and loss, joy and sorrow, with lullabies and laughter and the warmth of held hands, they might do something far greater. They might learn to live among them. And in a small restaurant on conquered Earth, a sign appeared in the window. Closed for singing lessons. The Emperor is learning harmony. Free soup for all who wait. The revolution had begun, one note at a time.